Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Thanks for joining me today. In this video, we're going to discuss 3 things you absolutely must know in order to avoid being a medical statistic. Over the past couple of years, we have seen many people take experimental drugs and experimental medical interventions only to find out, unfortunately, that they were the unintended consequences and they became the statistics when it came to unwanted side effects, catastrophic side effects, and general change in their life after participating in experimental interventions. The 3 things that I want to cover with you include, number 1, how to listen to yourself and knowing your instincts and validating them as right. Part 2, recognizing the nature of the system of you as a consumer in the medical industrial complex. And then 3, recognizing the limitations of your practitioner. So the first thing, our world has shifted so drastically in the past 80 years from the post-Soviet era forward, the United States with the victory, in the Cold War. We shifted away a lot of our production. You have to understand what you've inherited here. We shifted away a lot of our production in wartime, from the 40s and 50s, towards having new outlets domestically for that excess product. And one of the ways that this shifted was in consumption of services, consumption of products, definitely within the medical industrial complex. Commoditizing healthcare, commoditizing medicine, commoditizing sick care. And so in the process, a lot of people, since really the 50s forward, and this goes back to Eddie Bernays and the use of psychological manipulation en masse with people, to believe that they intuitively do not understand what is best for their bodies, and to believe that they intuitively, particularly as parents, do not know what is best for their child, and that the person with the white coat and the letters after their name, they're the one that knows best for you what you should put in your body, what you should do, and that you don't have an intuitive sense of knowledge and understanding in what is right and fit for you. That is to be negated. A person's intuitive inborn sense of what is good for them and what is beneficent for them, that has been systematically dismantled really since the 40s forward in the United States in particular, and really in the Western world. And a lot of this has to do with profit margins, and a lot of it has to do with, frankly, keeping our economy going. Why this matters for you in listening to yourself. Understand that God gave you an inherent ability since the time of the garden to have an intuitive sense and an inborn sense of what's good and bad and right and wrong, not only from a moral standpoint, but also on what is a physically beneficent thing for you versus something that's going to harm you. Let me give you an example. Ancient peoples and ancient cultures and customs have long known that certain plants, certain animals were dangerous, certain insects were dangerous, certain things were dangerous, and it was passed on to them. Now you can say, of course, that this is just First Peoples knowledge or tribal knowledge that got passed down. But you got to ask yourself, where did they get this from? Long before there were institutionalized alphabet soup organizations that told people what was safe and effective for them, older native peoples and native cultures have known these things. So where did this come from? The answer is, if you believe particularly in the narrative of creation as laid out in the Bible, our Creator gave us, with our default programming, a sense of knowing. When you look at what happened with Adam, for instance, in the garden, long before he met Eve, God gave Adam a task. And part of Adam's task was to name the animals and to give names to plants as well, right? To have the ability to bring order and sense in his world. But you got to ask something. When you're naming something, don't worry, this definitely goes back to helping you make better decisions. When you're naming something, what is the essence of what's happening there? You are labeling the essence of one of God's creations. God gave Adam the ability to do this for animals, for sure. He also gave us intuition with plants as well. This has been lost over the years, and particularly in a post-World War II world where we have been sold ignorance as some type of patriotic duty, that it's your duty to consume, that it's your duty to, to just yield over your sovereignty and yield over your decision-making to people who happen to be smarter than you and who are going to know what's better for you in your circumstances. This has not always been a good thing, I would submit to you. And in many cases, I would say that this is one of the key reasons why people are being unwittingly victimized and becoming the victim of unintended consequences and are becoming medical statistics. And it is because their intuitive understanding has been actively drowned out of them, and they have been disempowered from the time that they entered the public school system in the United States in many cases. They've been disempowered from owning that they have intuitive wisdom that should be listened to. So the first step to not being a victim of unintended consequences here and of not being a medical statistic is to listen to your gut and to get in touch with it. I know that may seem a little bit like hippy-dippy, but because we are constantly bombarded with sensory overload and input and screens, this empathic, intuitive side of us has been silenced and has had the volume turned down, and all of these other inputs have had their volumes turned up. So what that does is it creates clutter and overload in a world where there should be peace and calm, particularly when making decisions in your own best interest and medical decisions for your family. Always listen to your intuition. Always listen to your intuition. Medical providers may tell you this is the case for you. It's wise to have input, but if your whole being is telling you do not do something, do not go somewhere, do not have this intervention done, do not take this drug, then listen to it. Listen to it. Part 2. Understanding the limitations of your healthcare provider, and then 3, like what we've inherited. The limitations of your healthcare provider. A lot of people have the benefit of receiving care and of participating in a goods and services exchange here, of buying healthcare, purchasing healthcare, being a consumer of healthcare in the United States with a practitioner or a set of practitioners and providers who genuinely care about them, who are competent and skilled, and who are willing to entertain that they don't know everything. And that's a rarity nowadays. Because of the grid of power and the control and the institutionalized, systematized control grid that the medical industrial complex and the educational institutions that feed into the practitioner pool. Because of what this has set people up for, there's an incredible amount of arrogance on the part of providers many times. And I've seen this from the top down, whether it was from doctors, whether it was from administration, whether it's from the bedside nurses, less so in those cases. But it does exist. You are going to find people who are going to tell you that they're smarter than you, but really their competency is not something that you should really have competence in. In many cases, you've got people who are practicing medicine who are essentially warm bodies with a pulse who happen to have a medical license. And if you are a person who in particular values decision-making that is not rushed and not in a power dynamic instead of a vertical power dynamic where somebody is telling you this is good for you and you have to do it, but more of a horizontal sharing and then joint decision-making, which is what it should be. This is something that you got to own, and you got to be willing to take an honest assessment of this power dynamic. So ask yourself, as part of shielding yourself, what type of power dynamic am I in here? In any type of decision, whether it's with a drug, an intervention, some type of surgical intervention, whatever it is, what is the power dynamic here? Stop, pause, take a breath, take a step back. Do I feel pressure here? Do I feel pressure like this? Or is this sharing, mutual respect, partnership? If you feel like it's this, there's a problem. And because you are a consumer of a service, you have the choice to deselect from that process. You always have a choice. In the United States, you always have a choice whose services you are partaking. Unless, of course, DCS gets involved. And that leads us into the third of our points here on how to avoid being the negative consequence and being the statistic in unknown medical things. You have to understand, since COVID, and I've talked about this in a few videos, since COVID, but this has been honestly far before COVID, the power of the state, whether it was on the state and local level or the federal level, the power of the state has been supported, consolidated, and indeed fed in COVID-related issues, because that's the nature of things. Every good crisis, necessitates the government coming in and saving everybody, right? I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Because state and local governments have become increasingly involved, particularly in parent and child decision making. You need to be very conscious of this whenever you are going into the white coat world. And this goes back to really understanding your healthcare provider and their limitations. If at any time you have sensed that there is a vertical power dynamic where this provider is telling you you should do something, like you need to have your spidey senses up, going back again to the first part about your empathy and honoring your intuition. Long before somebody makes a phone call to DCS because you refuse to have your child's sleeve rolled up, or you refuse to put them on a medication that they're being told is because they're too hyperactive in school and your kid just needs to sit down, shut up, and learn in a block rote manner. Long before state governments get involved, there's usually a power tripping dynamic with the healthcare provider. So if you have a choice at all, deselect from that. Deselect from that if you can. When you're going into the medical industrial complex also, you need to be aware that the way your intake, like I'm just saying this from a nursing standpoint, the way that your intake goes, like when you go in, whether it's in the emergency room or like to a new doctor's office or to a new practice, they're going to ask you questions. And part of these questions are from a clinical standpoint. They want to understand where you are from a medical health perspective, but also there is an interviewing process that they are doing with you, which you should also be doing with them. And part of this interviewing process is this patient going to be compliant? Is this person going to do what I tell them to do? Is this person going to be a problem child? Is it going to be a problem child? And if you question the party narrative, and if you lead heavy with like, it's a conspiracy and the Illuminati are doing this, then you just send up every red flag in the world. The benefit here with knowing that you're being interviewed when you go into a new doctor's office, and that you're being interviewed not just for where you are clinically, but also honestly where you are politically, and going back to that power dynamic, whether or not people who are sold out for their party narrative, who actually hold a medical license, are going to use their power over you to help push their party narrative. Understand that that's what's happening. They are interviewing you, and you should be interviewing them as well. So the way that you answer questions matters. If it comes right down to, so are your interventions up to date? Are your interventions up to date? Are you compliant fully with the schedule? An answer that many people use is, yep, we totally are. Unless there's a direct need to know here, like unless there's an acute disease process, like you're not going to, like being over volunteering with truth is not going to set you up for success. So the less that you say, the better it is for you. And really understanding that you are your advocate. You are your advocate, and you are the protector of your family. And that comes right down to, in many cases, being willing to keep a rein on this and just nod and smile. Be like, yep, they're safe and effective. Totally safe and effective, But we're just kind of evaluating right now whether or not this is going to be the best fit for us. That's a good way to test it. So if they come at you and they're like, is such and such up to date? Like, safe and effective. Totally safe and effective. Yeah, are you willing to get this? Do you want to go ahead and get this done today? We're still evaluating the data, and we'll let you know. Just very non-confrontational, very chill. I like to use this one a lot. Like, yeah, I'll let you know. I'll let you know. When you start making things a stink, that's when the problems happen. So in this video, my goal was to show you, listen to your intuition, and to help you succeed in interacting with the medical industrial complex. Using your intuition. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. If something feels off, it is off. Particularly if you've had negative experiences in the past with drugs or with interventions or with whatever. You've seen, and your subconscious knows this, you've seen this show before. You don't have to sit all the way to the end to know you didn't like it. Part 2, knowing the limitations of the provider. Knowing that people who happen to hold medical licenses, who sit in front of you, who have white coats on, they're people too, which means they come with all of the flaws inherent to humanity, including pride, arrogance, ineptitude. But you could also have a good one as well. Not everybody's bad, but you really got to know who you're dealing with. And you got to know the limitations of the people who are sitting in front of you. And 3, you got to understand the nature of the system that you've entered into. It is a system that is set up in a very religious way, a very hierarchical, old school religious status of, here's the graduated garb, you as the peon, come down here penitentially asking for hope, and then maybe someone will deign to give you an indulgence of some sort from a medical standpoint. And you need to understand the system that you're going into, and that the good old days of having people who generally cared about you and had no ulterior motives involved and were able to suspend their political beliefs and give you good care, you can't bank on that anymore. I, as a nurse, even throughout my career, several times have been confronted with people in situations that I was vehemently against how they got there and what they did to get there. But you, as a healthcare provider, if you're a responsible healthcare provider, you have to be willing to give care to someone regardless of what you think about their personal choices or their political status or whatever. You have to be mature enough as an adult to do that. And unfortunately, we are not living in a world of mature adults anymore. We are living in a world full of children who have been given trophies for their participation and told how beautiful, smart, and prodigious that they were from the time that they were knee-high to a grasshopper. And now that they've been raised on screens in homes with an absence and a deficit of maternal input, in many cases, these same people are rendering quote-unquote care in environments where they have the ability to punitively respond to people who don't share their political beliefs. So buyer beware. And I hope that in this video you have been empowered, and also that you've hopefully been educated and informed a little bit as to just what you're dealing with when you're going into these places. So a little bit of a mixed bag there, like good and bad, but I hope that it equipped you, and I hope it was a blessing for y'all today. If you did enjoy the video, I hope you'll subscribe to me here on YouTube, Patriot Nurse. You can also support me and stay with me on Patreon, subscribe to our cryptocurrency, and PayPal. I got links below. So if you would like to educate yourself and be able to go less into that system, let me recommend a couple of opportunities for you. I have an online course. It's 4 hours. It's $129, and you can find that link below. If that class saves you from one useless trip to the doctor's office or to the ER, it paid for itself multiple times over. If you'd like to learn with me in an in-person setting, I have a few classes coming up in 2023. I have the schedule up for the first half of 2023 on the website. I'm going to be going to Texas in Keller, which is the Dallas area, and then also Salt Lake, Knoxville, Tennessee. Will not be traveling to the Northeast this year, so anything north of Virginia, I'm not going to be going up there. I may add a few more classes on the schedule, but I'm definitely planning to stay predominantly in the Southeast. I'll also be going to Kalispell, Montana in later part of the summer this year. But the full schedule is at the website so far, so check it out here, thepatriotnurse.com. That's where you can find opportunities to train with me. If you train in person, the cool thing is that you get to come and you get to learn with me to equip yourself in a 2 or 4 day setup on medical preparedness, but then also nutrition, survival nutrition, herbs, and old school disease. That's the second half of the class. You learn with me, but the benefit of the in-person classes is that you're also networking with like-minded people in your area, and it's just really fun. So if you want to meet amazing people and also learn at the same time, in-person class is the way to go. So that is at the website, patriotnurse.com. I hope you guys have a very, very blessed weekend, and I hope the video was a blessing for y'all. May the Lord bless and keep you all. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.